Welcome to Chapter 5, Descriptive Predictive and Causal Research and Design. Today we're going to look at some interesting things here that have been happening in research. And one of them was an in-class taste test with a corgi. Her name was Lady, and we put her kibble, which can be seen on the right, Royal Canine, and then Fresh Pet Puppy, a new dog food, moist dog food. And Lady went directly to the Fresh Pet Puppy and ate and finished it all. Did not even look at the kibble. But then she went to that later. But one of the things to keep in mind here as we go through our class, we're looking at little data now, and then this big data. So we've seen that with artificial intelligence, and we'll be talking more about artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence and big data can go through large data sets. You're thinking healthcare records that might be available and find patterns for people, different ages, and help doctors diagnose diseases for individual people just because of their profile. Here, little data, we're actually doing primary research, going out to the field, collecting data, maybe using secondary data, but we're doing this so that we can answer why questions for the most part. So seeing how variables relate to each other and what would lead particularly consumers to move toward purchase. Okay, this can be expensive to do and take a long time to collect and analyze it. The black box techniques, often it's inexplainable how they got to the answers that they did. And that's the way it is with artificial intelligence. You can't interrogate their thinking. It just presents results. And so this can lead to problems and embarrassment. Okay, we're going to look at the topic of rigor. And so in qualitative research, which we looked at in chapter 4, there's kind of mirror images here for quantitative research that would be done with surveys or in analyzing secondary data research, experiments. So there's this internal validity, how accurate was the measurements made, the external validity, can the truthfulness of this be extended to different contexts, how consistent is the measurement over repeated trials or samples, and then is it unbiased? In qualitative research, you have credibility, and then transferability, and then dependability, and then confirmability. So qualitative lacks the precision, but it can go deeper and address any question in that study, but you're locked into a set of variables that have been predefined in a survey research project or experiment. Now, rigor has to do with this strict adherence to rules, standards, or methods, resulting in a high level of difficulty many times, but it's essential for maintaining credibility and ensuring the validity of findings. So there's conceptual rigor, there's empirical rigor, there's analytical and reporting rigor. And these correspond to the different steps of the scientific method, which is explanation, observation, and testing. And then the steps in the research process are over here: problem definition, developing an approach, designing the study, field work, and analysis and reporting. Chris Wallace says that research design is crucial because it's like a map of what you'll do later in the research process when time is of the essence. So resources have already been marshaled and ready to go, and then you use them as you hit those timelines in your research project here. So chapter 4 was about exploratory research. Now we're focusing on conclusive research. 3 types: descriptive, predictive, and causal research, and longitudinal designs here for descriptive research. Importantly, you would have the same respondents in a later time being addressing the same questions, basically. So, and that's very powerful. It reduces error and gives you more precision, and it's a strong research design. So it really is capturing how consumers change over time, perhaps, or how durable they are. And then a cross-sectional design is just one slice in time. This is what was happening. And most research projects are cross-sectional, but that's a limitation of them as well. You don't see how these variables are changing over time. Exploratory, descriptive, and causal. We have this presentation here of how the nature of these, and we'll take a look at these more. This is a good reference slide for us. In terms of, I guess, most market research is descriptive in nature. So sales studies, consumer perception and behavior studies, market characteristic studies. So it's really just capturing a picture of what the current sentiments are for consumers on these different topics, how much sales is being done by an organization in a region, for example. So it is in that way, like counting or taking an inventory of sales. The steps in this process are defining the information need and then determining which exploratory design would be needed. Using a combination of them would be good for a sophisticated study. And then you construct a questionnaire and determine the sample size and develop a plan for your analysis, how you're going to collect the data. Sergio Roy, who's at Lieberman Research in Los Angeles, says many of the insights about consumers' future behavior are gained simply by asking consumers about their attitudes and intentions. So in this way, this is descriptive research by survey or observation. So we have these survey method types here: telephone interviewing, personal interviewing, mail interviewing, electronic interviewing. And the one that is widely used now are online panels over here on the right. And so there are occasions where you might use a mail panel. There might be occasions where you would send interviewers out to homes to interview customers, particularly if you want them to try products or review a wide set of brands and labels or magazine titles. You can do that more efficiently with somebody in the home. It is expensive to have somebody go out and make multiple calls and meet somebody in the home, but it can be done that way. So the online research panels, these panels have been pulled together by research companies. Decision Analyst in Arlington, Texas has a well-developed one, and they did this about 20 years ago. They saw what was coming, that privacy issues were rising, and so people just did not want to be ambushed by interviewers. So the way they do it is you receive a snail mail envelope that will invite you to join their panel. You'll then go online and fill out a profile information for yourself to let them know who you are. And then the more interviews you participate, the more points you receive, and the more points you receive, the more rewards you are eligible to receive. These might be knife sets, or could be cash, could be travel miles for airlines. So people are motivated to do this. We also have companies here, Qualtrics, which started off as a, I guess, survey software tool for doing computer interviews, but now they have their panels and they're quite good, and you can get business people on them if you want to identify exporters or those that are involved in exporting. You can find those. The incentive for those people to participate is about $75, maybe $100 each for a business person like that. There's Prolific. This is what academic researchers use frequently. These are sometimes professional survey takers, probably moms, 35 to 40, who are at home with kids, and they just might be who you want to answer your questions. Amazon.com has MTurk, MTURK, and for very modest sums, like you could probably get 100 respondents for a 20-question survey and probably get that done for $200. So of incentives that you're paying there. So everybody does it for $2, and it's a win-win for everybody. I think you need to, in terms of the representativeness of the sample on mTurk, you need to watch that as well as at Prolific or Qualtrics. And but the survey company should help you do that so you know you have the right group taking your survey. You still have to watch out for speeders or those that just straight line the survey. Their brains are not engaged. They're just trying to get through it but those are actually disqualified at the end, so they don't get points or rewards. Okay, so advantages, disadvantage of observation methods. We've seen that in the last class. It could have an observation bias, mechanical observation, checkout counters or in-store videos can be low bias there, could be intrusive, but when we go in retail stores now, we know that we're on camera there. Descriptive and causal survey designs. Okay, and now you're getting much larger samples and giving surveys. Sometimes these are extensive, 15 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. Respondents, that's more work for them. They should have a bigger incentive if they're doing a 30-minute survey. And you should tell them up front how long it's going to take to do that. And you would understand that through pre-testing the survey, which you should do with every survey. And then you basically debug the survey. What's wrong? What's confusing? What seems vague to the interviewees or the respondents. Predictive research designs, our book describes these as being non-experimental in nature, but yet on a survey, we could later then put together a model that has a flow or a sequence of constructs where one upstream construct would influence downstream constructs. Here, this is a study from Wyoming and Alaska citizens on nuclear power. So the upstream on the left is I am knowledgeable about nuclear power, and these linkages could be anywhere between the rectangles could be anywhere from minus 1.0 to plus 1.0, but they're positive 0.27, 0.25. So this knowledge influences support for nuclear power at the state and attitude toward nuclear power generation. And then those two mediating variables influence the importance of developing nuclear microreactors in my state. There's also another construct, quality of life concerns about new sources of electricity. This was really inconsequential. So really it's having knowledge about nuclear power that is upstream and influences the downstream constructs. So the implications here is for people that want to develop a nuclear microreactor industry, they need to make the public more knowledgeable about nuclear power. Experimentation, it's the gold standard in science. So here you have a control group and random assignment of people to either the control group or the manipulation or test group, the group that receives the change or the new version of things. So this causal explanation, we use it all the time. It means that something affects something else. So we have here Visine gets the red out. Okay, so eye drops that would do that. 2-bit towing will get you home. So they would be the cause of you getting home. The criteria for causality here, you have a cause X and an effect Y, which is downstream. So they have to be contiguous in time and space. We call this concomitant variation. So when there's concomitant variation, and then we see that X precedes Y, and then there's an absence of other causal factors, we have grounds for inferring causality. So in our experimental designs, we have these test units, we have independent variables or treatments, and then we have the dependent variable, and then we're trying to control, and we do, the extraneous variables when you have a control group in random assignment. So we're very interested in, I guess, conceptual correctness of what we're doing. So that you'd assess that through construct validity. So as the theoretical construct, it might be attitude, accurately measured, and unrelated elements are not included. Then there's content validity. Is a theoretical construct completely measured, all dimensions of it? So it could be an evaluative tendency. and you could have maybe thoughts about the brand and an evaluation of the brand, and then feelings that about the brand, and then a propensity to take action. All three of those could be gathered together and represent the completeness of attitude. Then you have face validity. This is really just a sanity check, looking at your constructs and model it, but giving it good thought. Does this really make sense? Is it logical? Could something else be going on here? So that's an important check. And then internal validity is, the assessment of the truthfulness of your measurements, measuring the underlying theoretical construct. And so then you have external validity, and that assesses how will this construct that you've measured, would you be able to measure it in different contexts and perhaps with different groups of people. But the one that's most important for experimental design here is internal validity. That's what, at the end of things, you're assessing, have we done everything right? Have we got the right measurements for our underlying construct? Have we controlled extraneous variables? So all of that, you want a high degree of internal validity. It is only accomplished with thought, intentionality, and the proper execution of scientific protocols. Now, validity is this extent to which the conclusions drawn from a particular research design are true. So it's the truthfulness of your results or the truthfulness of your design. So we talked about internal validity. And then there's these types of experimental research designs, pre-experimental. We'll take a look at some of these later. True experimental design. These have a control group. These have random assignment of subjects to the groups. And then quasi-experimental design. So they're non-equivalent control groups and field experiments. For example, at the checkout lanes at your grocery store, why couldn't we just measure those that are coming through the checkout lines and have somehow an experiment going on there with determining who's has a bigger ticket when they're leaving the store? Well, it would be very awkward to be in the store and directing some people that have been assigned to one group over to this checkout line that is longer, and then there's a shorter checkout line next to it that they're not allowed to go to. And so you would restrict their movement to the different lines based on your control of the experiment. If they're allowed to choose what line they go to, then it becomes a quasi-experiment. There's no longer a control group in that assignment of lanes. It's no longer random. So then you just have a quasi-experimental design. So there are important elements to assess in terms of extraneous variables. One is history. So it could be that you have your experiment takes a long time. So people get tired, they get bored. And so in that way, history could be influencing your results. Maturation could be that people kind of learn over the different trials in your experiment. And so that way the respondents are different due to their own learning and not the presentation of different variables to them. Testing effects, the respondents actually guess what you're after and start giving it to you. So, and you don't want that either. So if they sense that, oh, you're doing work for a Frito-Lay brand of potato chips, and every time that brand is presented, you go crazy about it to bring joy to the heart of your researcher, that is biasing and distorting the effects. Those are testing effects. Instrumentation could be that your gauges or instruments are wrong, or it's just not recording things properly. And then mortality. People could actually abruptly leave your experiment. They have another appointment. They need to go to the bathroom. So that's mortality. And I guess if you're in a field experiment where you might be collecting data over different waves of data collection that might be 3 weeks apart, people stop responding. after the first or second wave, and then you have a mortality issue there too. Some ways to control extraneous variables. Okay, so the way to do this is randomization and have these control groups here. So here you see that you have a target population at the bottom. You have a sample selected. It's part of this target population. Then you have this randomized assignment of these subjects to either of these groups. They don't get to choose which one they go to. You assign them there. In the control group, there will be no change in, they might not receive any treatment at all. But in the treatment group, they would receive treatment, and it could be a different version of the product, for example, and the control group just gets the ordinary product or the traditional product. Okay, experimental designs here. We have the pre-experimental, the true experimental, quasi-experimental, and then the statistical ones that are done through a mathematical assignment of people to groups. There's the one-shot case study. Okay, so this is not an experimental design. This would be pre-experimental. So it's just you find some consumers, you have them try your product, and you observe whether they like it or not. Okay, so this is not the gold standard in research, but sometimes in exploratory research, it's helpful to just understand how people might respond to such studies. Then you could have an observation of the front end, and then you have the treatment, and then an observation afterwards. Okay, here there's no control group, so it's not a true experiment, but at least you can get this effect of how consumers might feel about a product between time 1 and time 2. So you would subtract time 1 from time 2. That would be the effect. And the X here might be an advertisement for that brand. For example, they would watch a TV commercial. Here you have a true experimental design of pre-test, post-test control group design. So this is probably the bread and butter design. So here you're making 4 observations. This is the experimental group. So you have the randomized assignment of people to that group. And then you take an observation on the front end, give them some treatment. It might be the advertisement, TV ad, and then you judge them afterwards, or you assess their attitude toward your brand. Here's the control group, randomization. They go to the control group. There's measurement about their attitude toward the brand. Nothing, or it's just they read a newspaper article unrelated to the industry for the brand. And then on observation, the second observation here for this control group, you're asking their attitude again about the brand in question. So here you get these treatment effects, O2 or minus O1, and then you subtract O4 minus O3, and that is your treatment effect. So this randomization eliminates the bias. A factorial design here, this is to cut down on the number of respondents you would have. Here you see 9 groups, and then you would have this 3 different versions of an advertisement, and then it would be the amount of store information for a brand. And so then there's this different combinations here. This group of customers will get a no humor ad with low amount of store information. It would be group A. Then you get medium humor in the ad with low store information. They would be B. Then you'd have high humor in the ad, high and low information. That would be C. And it goes on across the different levels of store information. And then you can make your comparisons. That's the factorial design. So it does economize an assignment of your sample. So you're economizing there, but it's still, you have to, most of the time, 30 groups of 30 are needed at a minimum for those cells to, so you're getting at least 270 people in your study for statistical integrity there. Okay, so some final thoughts here. You got use multiple methods. Go to the lab, do experiments, then to the field, come back to the lab, qualitative research, work that in there too. Your questions and interests are going to change then. Uh, Use the lab to control extraneous variables. Go to the field to understand generalizability. But when you go to the field, there are these. Sometimes it's nigh impossible to get proper measurements. There's an Arby franchisee group based in Atlanta, RTM. I work with them, and they allowed me to their store data. They had hundreds of stores across the U.S. And every time they dropped a coupon in the local newspaper, a sheet of coupons for Arby's, you get promotion efforts that week. And then, but if there were seasonal effects, if 4th of July was happening or Thanksgiving, Christmas, the store traffic would go up and down, cold weather, bad weather as well, employee shortages that would impact the results. So there's many factors going on there. So the focus of interest would be store sales, and that was bouncing up and down all the time. So it was maybe too much variation and noise coming from different factors happening out there in the field. So the field is a demanding place, and your manager might say, "Yeah, we only go to the field." Well, you're going to restrict yourself because, again, sometimes it's very daunting to gain proper measurements in the field because your competitors are changing what they see what you're doing, then they're going to change, and they might know that you've got people in your store making measurements, or you're conducting particular research this week, so they drop their prices, for example. Test markets, controlled field experiments, that's what these really are. Places like Fort Wayne, Indiana, that has kind of a captive media market, Wichita, Kansas, Buffalo, New York. So these are favorite places to do a test market. Really test markets are expensive to do. They delay the rollout of your brand. And so a lot of times the brands, if they have a new product to be introduced, they'll do a soft rollout, maybe in a place like Fort Wayne or Wichita. And so what they're doing there is, if things look like they're working decently, they'll just continue to extend the rollout to different geographic markets because they don't want to be preempted by their competitors. In these test markets, you can compute like trial penetration for your new version of your brand or your new brand itself. So you gauge what is the trial motivation for consumers. So, did they buy, how many of them bought the product? And then how many were actually aware in the market of your product? And then the distribution that you had accomplished in that market, you'd add those, or I'm sorry, you multiply those together, and then you get a estimate of trial penetration. And 3% actually for a consumer packaged good brand, like a new version of a salty snack food, that's good. So but management knows that you're not going to crush the current incumbent brand and drive them out of the market. You're going to start with something around 3%. Now, in recent years, companies like Amazon that have a internet retailing, they can do A/B testing, and they do it quite well, and they do it all the time. So, for example, presenting a brand on their website, they can present it on a side view, or a beauty shop up close. They could have somebody holding the brand, if it's a holdable, and they could have one version, somebody holding it, variation A, and then variation B, and then they send people or they serve up the different web page to half the group in a different way than the other half. And then they can see how many click through or actually buy the product. And they just go with which ones are working better. So that is their research that's really very much connected to their sales program. They just go with what's selling, and over thousands of purchases, that takes the day. Thank you for your learning.